This is the Aftermarket Radio Network.
All right, welcome everyone to yet another episode of Diagnosing the Aftermarket A to Z. I'm Matt Fanslow, and I got to level with you. I am on a run. I am on a run here with guests that I think the world of, and I'm worried that I talk up all my guests enough that it starts to lose some credibility, but no way. I mean every word of it, and I am extremely excited to have Robert Silverstein, better known as Dutch amongst his friends, so he makes me call him Mr. Silverstein. And he is the president of A&M Auto Service in Pineville, North Carolina.
Yep.
He is also just very active in our profession, just quite literally working his tail off to raise that tide for everybody. Again, something I probably repeat often about many people, including and especially my guests. Just one of the greatest, nicest, most down-to-earth people I've ever met in my life. It's always a joy to talk to him, whether it's via podcast or even just instant messaging, something like that. So thank you very, very much for gracing this interview, Mr. Silverstein.
Mr. Silverstein, sir. All right, let's get it. All right, kids. Sir. You can Mr. Silverstein, Captain Silverstein, makes no, your majesty. Really, it doesn't matter to me. Yeah. I'm all there. Very kind words. If you make sure that I have the spelling of your address correct, the check will be en route soon. I don't do Venmo or any of that. I'm way too old. I will send you the stuff in PayPal, but you're going to have to take the 3% hit because, you know, I'm a yid. I'm not going to do that.
You're not going to do
I'm not paying the percentage, you know. I'm delighted to be here.
I guess we've talked a lot about what we're going to talk about, and it's a pretty wide range. So I think we're just going to kind of pick one thing and really speak to techs. Even like myself, it's hard to know what kind of value do I really provide the business, you know, in this case, auto shop, but what am I bringing to the table, to the shop and to the shop owner and the performance of the shop that can be in exchange also, maybe negotiating points, maybe just peace of mind, but more on the negotiating end for wages or compensation. And I'm not even talking like confrontational, far from it. I don't think many people really know what are you really bringing the shop in the form of profits? Because I think fundamentally that is my job is to, and I'll tweak it a little bit for my personal preference, that my job is to make the shop or make the business as ethically profitable as possible. That's my job. I might be given a certain set of tasks or a framework of which that expectation is to be fulfilled in the eyes of management. But, you know, across the board, how can I learn or better educate myself to just know myself when I'm driving home or sitting at home thinking about things and maybe looking at, you know, across the fence at this, what looks like greener grass, or I feel like I have a legitimate position to negotiate, you know, whatever that may be, added benefits, higher wages,
well, there's two ways of looking at this. The first is the intangible benefits that you're going to be bringing to a facility, that you're going to be providing the owner. And it's not something that they've designed a metric for. Okay. You're not going to get paid for this. You're going to be bringing, if you're worth a crap, you're bringing the intangibles in that, number one, you're going to be reliable. You're going to show up every day when you're supposed to show up early. All right. If you have an 8 o'clock start time, you don't show up at 8 o'clock. You show up at 1:45. Because if you show up at 8 o'clock, in my book, you're late. All right. You have to be at your workstation. All right. You're going to bring a level of professionalism and competency, which is going to further the reputation of the facility at which you work. If you're good at what you do, then while you might not individually get the accolades from the public, you will get noticed by the shop owner or manager in charge. Okay. Someone will notice that because they're going to want to start feeding you work. If you're good at what you do, then, and you're enhancing the shop's reputation because you don't have many comebacks, because you're reliable, because people, when you leave the car, it's the little things, you don't leave it like a pigsty, right? If you're replacing a window regulator, you're not leaving fingerprints on the glass. You're taking pride in what you're doing. You're furthering. Okay. Now that's very, very difficult to measure. There is no metric for that. When you're in a position where you want to further your career insofar as your pay, the only thing that you have is a record of your achievement. And the record of your achievement is in the form of your paychecks for the last year and your attendance roster. Because what is a complaint that is frequently heard amongst owners is that lack of reliability and the fact that this guy said that he could turn 60, 65 hours a week, and we have the work, and he's struggling for 38. He's struggling for 35. And absenteeism is a killer. So when you want to approach someone and saying, okay, I hear that through the grapevine that you're hiring, or you're seeing you answer an ad, the first thing that you need to do is you need to be able to go through all your pay stubs for like the previous year, because you want to show that you're consistent in your behavior. And you can look and say, okay, over the last year, I have averaged X amount of hours per week. And from that, you then say, why was it that way? Was it because there legitimately wasn't any work? That happens. And that's not the fault of the tech. Okay. That's the owner's responsibility to try to bring in the vehicles so that the tech can do his job by providing a good service of making ethical recommendations for those items that are needed. Once you have that information of how many hours and why, you can then go to your prospective employer with that and say, okay, this is what I bring to the table. If you look, I have copies of my time cards, or I can tell you I always show up on time. It's very difficult to prove unless you have your copies. But when you say, I consistently turn whatever the hours is, 38, 40, 60, 75 hours. And here is a record of my time. Now you've taken an unknown and you've just added your credibility to it because you have a record of it. You're not making this stuff up because it's going to have your payroll information and everything else on it. This is a legally binding document. You can't start, screwing around with this stuff. Now you have a record of what you're capable of doing. And if you say, look, I think, we're making up a figure, okay? On average, 44 hours a week. And quite candidly, I'm not utilized as well as I could be. I'm just not. I can guarantee you that if you, and I'm willing to put it in writing, if you have the work for me, I can easily turn 50 or 55 hours a week. And I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is and say, let's schedule a performance review. But be advised, sir, or madam, whoever your prospective interview is, I'm going to be keeping track. Because you want to be held accountable as a tech. You also want the owner to be held accountable, right? Because we all know, not only do you have techs who pad their abilities, B techs who say they're A's, how many hours they add. You also have owners who say, I guarantee you're going to be busy all the time. You're going to go home and you're going to be so exhausted. And if you want 85 hours a week, you can do it here. And then you say, okay, that's great. What are you offering? Can I see records? I've always brought the records with me because I have a 3-step process. And the last step of the process before the formal job offer is having dinner with the candidate and their spouse or significant other. Because if the significant other isn't on board with the change, life sucks. That person will make life miserable for that tech. And I do a shop tour with the significant other because I want them to see what it is that they're going to be spending so much time doing. So again, to summarize, the intangibles is you're going to be increasing shop performance, increasing shop standing in the community insofar as reputation. The tangibles are basically the hours that you're going to turn, that you're going to prove, that's going to result in more money. If you're not willing to address both of those things, if you go to an interview and the only thing you're focusing on is saying, I, me, this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to, and you don't mention the company, if you don't know anything about the company, if you haven't taken the time to go to the company's website and find out anything about the About Me page, when did the company start, what was its mission, then you're not a team player. There's enough ego in the industry to begin with. We don't need any more. We need producers.
Yeah, or the reviews, or yeah, exactly. Yeah, I wish the listeners could see me nodding.
Remember, Matt, it's not what you say, it's what you can prove, because it's two strangers that are meeting for the first time. They might have had a telephone interview. All right. But now everybody is on the 30-day rule. They're going to put their best foot forward, right? When they wind up doing this, because the owner wants to get a tech for productivity. The tech typically wants a job, right, that he can be proud of going to work, et cetera, et cetera. So everybody's going to try to put their best foot forward, but there's going to be a little bit of theater that's involved, right? I mean, we have to be honest about it. So, because until you prove it, in my book, you're full of crap. If you come unprepared, if I say to you, okay, how many hours can you do a week? And you easily say, look, it's not a problem. I'll knock back 60, 65 hours a week. That's great. That's wonderful. And you have any pay stubs to show me? And you say, no. I'm thinking, why not? Even if you took the pay stub and you redacted out, you markered out in black marker what your pay was, but it listed your hours. Okay. Why aren't you willing to prove what you can do? Because otherwise you're just a stranger who's making these wonderful claims, right? You're selling yourself without proof. You know, Christopher Hitchens said that which can be asserted without proof can be dismissed without proof.
Kind of talking about either maybe not new tech, fresh out of school or anything like that, but interviewing, they have whatever level of experience, thinking about making a move to another shop and having this information. I don't know. I've never had somebody come in to an interview with time cards or some sort of a documentation showing that they do show up on time. And then, production numbers are always, off the cuff, something I don't pay a lot of attention to.
Well, you can have, a lot of guys have working interviews where they'll say, okay, come back on this day. I'll give you X amount of money. I'll pay you as long as it's less than $600 so that you can be an independent contractor. I'll pay you for the day. I want to see how you work. But the fact is that, and for me, that shows initiative. If somebody comes to an interview and they are prepared for the interview, that shows initiative. But if it's really important as a shop owner, it's not a problem to say to when you're having the telephone interview, yeah, I'd like to see you. We can meet at my office or a restaurant or, anywhere that's a non-threatening environment. Please bring a copy of your pay stubs and your attendance. Well, now you've issued a challenge. Because if the guy told you that he could turn 65 hours a week and he shows on his pay that he's doing 38, okay, the question is why? Well, the work wasn't there is going to be the response. Okay, but I see you were there for 4 years. The work wasn't there and you decided that you were going to remain there for 4 years?
Yep.
What's that all about? which is fine.
What if they come from a shop where that's acceptable?
That's fine. If they come from a shop where 35 hours is acceptable, okay, then I'm going to look at him as being a 35-hour tech. I'm not going to look at him as being a 45 or 50. I might give him the opportunity to prove how fast he is and how thorough he is in a working interview. But you can only swing at what's pitched, right? So if a guy tells you that I'm capable of so much more, okay, you have to prove it, right? If you were going to buy a car and the guy who is selling you the car can tell you that this thing can run below 10 in the traps,
yep,
you're going to want to see some damn time slips, right? If he shows up with a 12.3, this is not, well, I was taking it easy on the engine. I knew that I could do it, but no.
Yeah, look at my launch times. My reaction time was really bad on that one.
Yeah, let's check out my 60 foot. Come on. This is not, it's not rocket science. There's no reason. Trust is earned. It's not bestowed. There's no reason for someone to trust you with something that is as important to them as their business based on your word alone. Now, if that guy, it works for a shop and he has a reputation of busting the work out. I mean, because, we're in a big, small industry and which shops in town, guys hustle, they hump, right? Because you're talking to tool man and, you're getting the idea that this guy, he has got a really good reputation. And the way to do it is for an owner is to do reconnaissance. I've gone in to parts departments for dealerships where they only know me by the phone, where there were techs, and turned to the people in parts and said, hey, listen, if you had to get your car fixed, give me 2 guys on the floor that I should ask for when I bring my car in. Well, there you go. These are people who work with them every day. They see it every day. Right? If somebody says, oh, yeah, I can do great work, I'm going to check up on them because I owe it to my family to do that. And I want that technician to check up on me. I want the tech to ask questions so that the tech can have an understanding of what it is that he or she is getting into. The tech ought to know the difference between a relationship versus a transaction-based business. They ought to know the difference between advocacy and salesmanship. They ought to know the difference between a volume-based business and one that isn't. Are they focusing on car count or average RO? These are questions that a tech needs to know because you can be in a very, very busy shop and have a really high car count, as we've discussed, I think, on other podcasts, and you're very, very busy, but you don't make any money. Right. Conversely, you can be in a shop where you're getting 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours per car and get 4 cars scheduled a day. Now, there are guys that have 4 cars scheduled by 11 o'clock in the morning. Right. But by 3:30 in the afternoon, they've gone through 9 cars and they haven't worked through lunch. They still took their lunch. These are questions that they're making more money. So these are questions that a tech needs to answer. I don't care if a tech is straight out of school. He has to know what car count is, what ARO is, what gross profit is, what gross profit dollars is. There's a lot that a tech has to know in order to be able to speak the language that the owner speaks to convey the message of his worth.
Yeah. Speaking of young techs, Dutch, it's no secret we're facing a technician shortage. Napa Auto Care is addressing that. The free 2-year apprentice program offers a variety of training to produce a technician with 3 ASE certifications. To learn more, members can visit member.napaautocare.com.
Yeah, Napa's got a good program for that. They really do. And they support the shop with tech because they have an apprentice toolkit, which is an excellent value. So they really stepped up in this regard. It's true. Disclaimer, I'm a Napa Auto Care Center and have been for 16, 17 years now. I think since 2000. Well, actually more than that, but it's not that they're not without problems. They're like any other organizations, but this they've really done right. They absolutely have.
Yeah. And you can speak from experience that, what they're doing is I mean, I'm not sure I'm aware of too many other programs that are like that to help shops kind of grow their own or help mature that tech from or evolve even maybe from entry level up to, wherever they're going to end up.
It's a great idea. In aviation, they have the programs, they're called ab initio, where they take students who are learning to fly. And the students wind up going through the program where the student's paying for it. It's not free. The student's paying for it. He's getting his licenses, et cetera. And as he's moving up, going from his private, his instrument, his multi-engine, his commercial CFI, et cetera, he gets the opportunity to be in the pipeline to be on one of the regionals. Lufthansa has a program. Several airlines have a program like this, where he's actually now getting paid to work as a first officer. So ab initio has been around for a long time in aviation, and I think it's great that it's happening here. Growing your own has its own advantages and disadvantages too, but it's a good program. Right. It really is.
It's kind of interesting. I know it's probably too long ago for it to be relevant from my perspective from when I went to school, but typically what I see with young people coming in, they've had classes on interviewing. But it's kind of like you say, they come dressed a certain way, composed a certain way. They have their application or they fill out their application, try to write legibly, stuff like that. But I'm not sure they were ever educated, like you're saying, to ask those types of questions. Like, is this a volume type shop or is this an ARO type shop? What kind of a work environment am I getting myself into? And kind of having that reckoning with yourself are you the fast paced person? That bang, 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 bang. I want to rifle through these vehicles, like you're saying, 9, 10, 12 cars a day or more. Or is it the other way where, 3, 4 cars on average with the higher ROs, typically stuff like that.
Well, see, that's the problem where there is a really, really huge void between the academic world insofar as education in the real world. Okay. We used to say in aviation that you really wanted to learn to fly when you were a flight instructor. You got your flight instructor's rating, and that's when you learn to fly, because people would try to kill you. So, I mean, you don't know how to do something until you've actually done it. And the fact is that oftentimes the people that are teaching the classes are not successful shop owners. These aren't people that are multi-store operators who are doing this because they want to pay it forward. And all the ones that I've seen, and it's a very small data set, and I certainly admit that I could be wrong. But in my experience, the people that have been doing this are former techs, failed shop owners on this, and that's about it. Nobody's, when it gets to the point where they need the job. Right. Well, if you're a successful shop owner and you're retiring, now you're doing this, you don't need the job. You might want to do it out of passion because you want to help pay it forward, but you don't need the job, because if you've been doing your business right, you have money set back. I have a friend of mine, I haven't spoken to him in a while, but he's an instructor and he had an engineer. He was an engineer. So he was never a shop owner. He was an automotive engineer. And he did this. He retired after 20 years, and he is now an instructor for one of the local auto-related programs. I'm not going to give the company name away. That's not far from here. And he laments the fact that they have to give out awards for attendance. They make a big deal about giving out attendance awards. So at that point, that's real world, isn't it? If you have to be congratulated for what? Showing up? Doesn't seem like a real high bar. Well, that's one of the things that I talked about, wasn't it? So bringing your attendance record. to show, any interview that I've ever had with any member of the staff in any position in my shop, I've always asked, how many days of work did you miss last year? That's all. And I'm looking for an honest response because it really depends on the reason, right? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because I'm guessing the last couple of years, those numbers are inflated, depending also where you live, but a lot of them are inflated because of some mandates or whatnot. We have a customer service rep that she's missed a lot of work because her daycare has some very progressive...
An abundance of caution.
Yeah, they're beautiful. That's a very well stated abundance of caution when concerning COVID. So any kind of close contact, it isn't just that kid and kids in that quote unquote room. They pretty much shut the whole thing down. So there's been,
it's really tough. I mean,
what do you do?
My heart goes out to number one, the single parents to begin with. And I've hired single parents. And when I was going to school, if you had the sniffles or you had something that was going on with you, unless it was a matter of you ruptured your appendix or you severed a hand, you went to the nurse's office and you sat in the nurse's office until your mother could come get you after she was finished with work. Right. There was no, there was no, come on, you have to collect your kid because he or she has the sniffles and we can't, and one of the people that worked for me, she, a very, very nice woman, but she had 3 children that were, you send small kids to school, they get sick. It's a breeding ground for colds, et cetera. Yeah, absolutely. And she was constantly having to leave work early and would miss days because this one, there wasn't anybody who could stay, and my heart goes out to her, but she didn't last real long here because there's only so much of that crap you can put up with. I mean, you can try to extend yourself. You're certainly understanding, et cetera. But at the end of the day, you have overhead that's got to be paid. You have work that has to be done. And Duke Energy does not give a rat's behind if you couldn't get all the work that you needed out to collect the revenue to pay their bill because you were being a nice guy because this particular kid got a bad case of flatulence. I mean, it's not, I'm sorry, it just doesn't work that way. Johnny has a tummy ache. Well, make him puke in the wastebasket and sit his ass down in a chair. I mean, I don't wish to be insensitive, but I don't care.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that happened. that happened in my time where kid went to the sick room. They called it the sick room. There's 3-4 cots in there, and he was back a couple hours later. Like,
yeah, I puked, and then they go back to class, right?
I threw up. I felt much better afterwards.
And again, obviously, if some child is seriously sick, et cetera, you want to take it on a case by case basis. But this, this overabundance of caution in this nanny state stuff has really affected work. So for a while, I just determined that I was not going to be hiring any women who had children in those years where they were going to be in school where they couldn't get home if they needed to. That was, if somebody stellar had presented, I might have reconsidered, but that wasn't in my plan.
So if you have some of these numbers, you can prove that you are reliable, and whatever the production numbers are, let's just assume they're acceptable. What can a tech use those? How would they go about using those numbers to determine if this is going to be a dangerous framework or really dangerous way of framing this question, but I'm not sure how else to do it. But determine if they're being treated fairly. Well,
being treated fairly is completely subjective. For one person, being treated fairly can be completely different than someone else's view of what it takes. What you have to determine at the very beginning is if you're going to ask for a specific dollar per hour, either hourly or if you're going to flat rate, whatever, oh, excuse me, where's that sick room? Wait, I got a wastebasket here.
I'll be better in a minute.
Right. They have to be able to know right off the top that one of the formulas that they should know is if they have to know what their posted shop labor rate is. One of the first questions after being thanked for the opportunity, after they meet somebody and have some polite exchange of small talk, there's going to be time when the interviewer is going to say, well, do you have any questions for me? Do you have any questions before we begin that I can help answer for you? And one of the first questions should be is, can you tell me what your labor rate is, your posted labor rate? And the answer, he shouldn't be surprised, is to find that there are going to be several, right? Yeah, a tiered labor rate. But on average, what is your average labor rate? So right off the top, in today's business environment, he should know that what the target that the shop is looking for is a 70% gross profit on labor. So he has to be able to calculate in his head or you can write it down and say, okay, stop for a second. You know, it's not a problem to do it. You can even go online and get a gross profit calculator and have it on his phone at the time that he asks the questions. I mean, because they're online.
Yep.
So that he knows what he can reasonably ask for. If he's asking for a figure, if the guy's got and we're making something up, if the fellow has if the shop rate is $85 an hour and he's an A-Tech who wants $35 an hour unloaded labor rate, the odds are that shop cannot afford him. That's not the shop for him, right? Because when you do the math, you can see that that's just not going to cut it. So one of the things he has to do is he has to say, okay, can the shop cut it? He has to be able to look at, and all this involves work. And people, not just techs, all people are generally inherently lazy, right? So another question is, well, where do you pull your customers from? That's a reasonable question, because what he should have done is the tech should have gone to city data and looked up to see what the demographic is in the area. Well, if you're in a blue collar area where the average income is $38,000 a year or 40 or 45, that's going to tell you something if the owner tells you, well, we pull pretty much from a radius of 5 miles from the shop. Okay. If he says, well, we have a radius of 5 miles, and within one of those 5 miles, you have, as we have here where I am, the Yuppie Containment Center, where you have the demographic shows that it's basically 6 figures. Okay. That tells him more about the type of work that he's going to be doing or potentially could be doing. He can ask to see work orders. I have no objection to a tech coming up to me and saying, listen, I think I'd like to work for you, et cetera, but I'd kind of like to know, if we're in a process of feeling one another out, I'd kind of like to know what it is I might expect. Can I see, you can block out the names for me. I don't need to know any personalized information. Can you show me in your shop management system, your point of sale, you can do whatever you need to do to show me how many hours per RO your average ticket is and how many hours your techs are turning per day on average, which is information that he should have. An owner should have car count, should have average RO, should be able to determine what his demographics are, all the information that he should know. And there's a lot, but I'm leery because I don't want guys' eyes to glaze over. I don't want to start going into formulas and stuff, but basically he wants to make sure that he's joining a winning team. And one of the things that he can do is talk to somebody who's working there, right?
That's really good advice, if you can.
And if you don't feel comfortable doing that, right? Because I'm not telling you to stalk a tech to find out when he's going to the Waffle House for breakfast on Sunday. All right, so you could just pop by, oh, hey, have him ask around through the tool dealers. A tool dealer who stops by a shop, especially if there's going to be a lot of dealers, Mac Go, Cornwell, Snap-on, who's going to be stopping by shops, that tool dealer is going to know, number one, does the shop say typically busy? When every time you've been there on a Wednesday or whatever, is the shop generally busy? Number one. Number two, how are they fixed for equipment? Number three, does he go to training a lot? Does he bring training in? What do the techs say? And that's a question that you can ask the prospective employer, right? Which is, tell me how long your techs have been here. Is there high turnover? If there is, why? You can ask, and the tech should have no problem being introduced by the owner, if what he's telling you is accurate, to the staff. A lot of guys want to keep everything, secret, et cetera. No need. You want some level of transparency. Now, a tech should not expect to be able to turn to an owner and say, I want to see your tax returns for the last year. That ain't going to happen. Okay. Well, you could ask, but the result is not. Yeah, the result is not going to be what you want. Okay. You have to do your due diligence and your homework. Too many times, techs leave because they're dissatisfied with the culture, or they think that they can earn more money, et cetera, someplace else, or they're appreciated more, or whatever, without actually doing their homework. Do your homework. Ask the questions. If you were an employer, right? If Bill Gates magically were to confer upon you a shop and say, okay, I bought you all the equipment, I bought you everything you need, but you have to staff it. And you have to show me, you can get to keep the shop completely free, but you have to show me that you've done work to determine who the best hires are going to be. What questions are you going to ask? Well, you have to be able to answer those questions yourself, don't you? What other choice do you have, Matt? Right? If you want to show your value, which is what we got back to in the beginning, if you want to show your value to your employer, you have to prove your value. The only way to prove your value is through past precedent. That's it. Money talks, BS walks, right? Okay, so if you could show that you could turn time, if you could show that you show up, if you could show that you're going to add to the culture, if you're going to be a can-do person, or you're going to be a whiny little bitch. I mean, what are you going to do?
Are you a repair shop owner? Do you find yourself struggling with any of the following? Uncertainty about the future and competition. Are you spending too much time managing chaos and struggling with new employees? Do you lack time to invest in learning best practices, or there's no time to spend on effective marketing? How do your finances look? Are you reactive rather than proactive? Do you know where you should be, when to grow, when to shrink? If any of those situations describe where you are today, you are finally in the right place. Repair Shop of Tomorrow is Napa Auto Care's newest endorsed partner. They are helping shops all over the nation run more profitable automotive repair shops by utilizing proven business best practice marketing and coaching to leverage Napa programs to drive quality, car count, sales, and profits. Repair Shop of Tomorrow will look at productivity, efficiencies, effective labor rate, average hours per car, labor profit percentage, measure and manage labor, and how you can create net profit. Team up with coaches to create systems, operations, and procedures using a business flow chart to help you reach your goals. Repair Shop of Tomorrow will help measure and manage the results to help each business succeed. Best of all, it's not do it yourself. It's all done for you. Their goal is to help dealers do what they do best, fix cars and build relationships at the counter and in the community. Repair Shop of Tomorrow will take the other minutia off your plate. The Repair Shop of Tomorrow offers a tier-based program to not only generate more business today, but to transform your shop into a top-level shop of tomorrow. Repair Shop of Tomorrow can teach you how to make your shop profitable. They can teach you how to recruit and how to make more labor dollars for your shop. Interested in Repair Shop of Tomorrow? Call 440-545-1230 for a free 20-minute, no-obligation consultation, or contact your servicing Napa Auto Parts store. I think we're on the same wavelength. I think I would tweak it slightly in that I'm trying to think of how to phrase it better, that a tech is empowered, or maybe not just a tech, but employee, but really a tech, to avoid the scenario of shop B, they go in and they turn in their notice. Either you do an exit interview or you're like, really, well, I didn't know there was an issue. Well, shop B, they're going to give me $5 more an hour and, or higher guarantee or whatever. And then what I think happens a lot, we've experienced this a fair bit, is that then the shop or the shop owner or whatever employer offers them as much or more than shop B offered. And from what I've seen, they usually stay. I have quite a few friends that would argue till they're blue in the face, and it's hard to disagree with them that they should not accept that. I wasn't worth this much to you until I threatened to leave or I was going to leave. I want to avoid that situation altogether. The tech can kind of assess their value so that, and I'm not trying to demonize, I don't want to sound like I'm demonizing shop owners either, because I think like you said, it's laziness, or maybe it's just complacency too. Like there's no complaints or whatever, things are going good. You get busy, there's a lot of stuff to do. There's maybe the automatic cost of living increases, and maybe not suggesting anything, just maybe when there's a shop labor rate increase, everybody kind of gets a bump. I'm not implying that that's the way it should work at all. I'm just trying to have scenarios here where the techs would get a bump that's maybe not quote unquote scheduled. And then because of that, if you don't have a proactive employer, or you're not a proactive employer, that you're on top of things like, hey, intangibles, tangibles, bump, that you're not sitting there as a tech or as the employer or manager with this scenario of, here's my 2 weeks, here's my 3 weeks. I'm going to shop B, more money, closer to home, shorter drive, whatever. They're going to let me focus on this area of repair that I like better than what I do here, blah, blah, blah. That was part of the nature of the question, is to avoid that scenario from both perspectives, as a tech and as a employer.
There's a double standard that's being applied here, and I hope that, and this is not a personal attack on you, but I'm asking that you're looking at this from a different perspective. All right, and the double standard is that each of us, employer, employee, as individuals, right? We each navigate by the star of enlightened self-interest. That somebody far wiser than I said that. Okay, so your friends who say, well, in the case where I say I'm going to shop B and now they're going to give me $5 an hour, and my original employer says, well, I'll match it. And some of your friends said, well, listen, why didn't you give me that to me before? Well, because he was looking out after his self-interest. The same way, if you're looking out after your self-interest, you're going to make the move to go somewhere else. So before you make the move to go somewhere else, wouldn't it behoove you to speak to your employer and say, hey, listen, I think I've been doing a good job for you. Let's have a periodic review over the next X, Y, and Z, month, 30 days, whatever, because I'd like to have some things to talk to you about. Okay. And one of the things that you're going to talk about is a raise or training. In other words, the righteous indignation that your friends feel when they say, well, I wasn't good enough before, but now I'm going to get it. Well, that's a bunch of crap, because if they remain mute, their employer's not a mind reader, right? It's the squeaky wheel that gets the grease. They have a responsibility to relay or to convey their needs, their wants to their employer, to see if their employer is able to do that. Now, in the case with the $5, perhaps the employer would say, okay, I can do that, because in his mind, he was going to institute, a labor rate increase. So now he can afford it. Now, but whereas before he couldn't. now he can afford it because the loan that he took out on the piece of equipment that he's paying X amount of dollars for every month has been paid off. He doesn't have that debt service anymore for whatever reason. You can't automatically assume, and that's that righteous indignation that the tech has. Well, I wasn't worth it before, but now that I'm going to leave, now I'm worth it. You have no idea what that owner's going through. None. So unless you establish open lines of communication where you can talk to one another as civil human beings, you have no cause to bitch. I'm sorry, you lose the right to complain if you're waiting for reactive action instead of proactive action. Now, I'll go to my guys and I talk to them frequently, not like once a day or any of that sort of stuff. And it's not a problem. Just ask him, is everything okay? Is there anything I can do for you? Is there something you need? Everything all right at home? I'm just, I'm curious about you. I want you to know I'm concerned. If there's something that you need, something you want to talk about, whatever it is, I just want to make sure you're happy here. And I proactively give raises without being asked. I proactively buy tools and equipment for them. Theirs. I give them without being asked because you have to show this stuff. So for the tech that says, well, how do I know what I'm worth? Well, you have no idea. You're worth what your employer is willing to pay or someone is willing to pay. That's it. And because you can get more money from the other person or the other shop, that's great. That doesn't mean your first employer holds anything against you if he really legitimately can't afford it. Or how about this? He can afford it. He just doesn't want to. Doesn't he have the right to do that?
Yep. I think so. No, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You have every right to not work there, and they have every right to.
This is what I'm offering. This is what I can afford to do, or this is what I'm willing to do. And if they can make more money, do anything, whatever it is, sure to commute home, because there's some things in your example that the other shop owner can't. If a guy has to drive 50 minutes to get to work and there's a shop that's 10 minutes from his house that allows him to avoid 2 hours worth of driving in the morning, I don't care how much money you give him. If that guy is family oriented, he's going to want to go home. Right. And there's nothing that $5 an hour more is going to do for him. Right. Because he wants to be home. Right. He wants to attend his kids' ball games. He wants to do, whatever it is, or his daughter's dance recitals, whatever. Doesn't matter. The fact is that kind of is not something you're going to put a price on, insofar as $5 an hour is not going to make up for it. So the question is, how are you going to judge from the, you have to be from what the employer can afford. You have no idea what the employer can afford, except in the grossest terms with ballparking based on labor rate, et cetera, and based on the amount of work. And you're going to have to do some calculations. So if you're at one shop and you want to leave and and why would the employee say that? Why would the employer say that? Because even if they could afford that $5 an hour, let's say they can't. They really can't. They're going to have to dig into company savings to get this. They're not, the employer wants to bank X amount of dollars. He's not going to be able to do this at this point. The cost to onboard a new employee is stupid expensive. Advertising, lost productivity, et cetera, et cetera. It's just ridiculous. It takes time and you're losing. So it's not just a matter of the $5 an hour. It's a matter of the advertisements that you have to put in the paper, the lost revenue, the opportunity cost of that, because when that employee's gone, you're not getting work out the door. And if the employee was decent, if he was a solid B who wants to go somewhere else for whatever reason, you finding another B who's going to be able to come in and immediately take his place insofar as efficiency and productivity is not really likely. Not if the guy's any good. He's going to take time to spin up. He's got to get good at the shop and feel comfortable.
I'm trying to think, like, analyzing where the questions come from and why I ask them and why it's interesting and why I feel like those listening, those are the types of questions they would ask. Is I think it's been, and this isn't like a statement. This is, I think we've had it been told now as technicians long enough that we've kind of been dumped on for many years, undervalued, not just by the public, but by our employers. And so now with the short or, technician shortage, or I think it's employees shortage across the board right now. We're trying to play catch up, or trying to get a sense of what it means now. Where do we fit in the world of skilled trades? And, I know there's a lot going on with it, even, at our shop too, just thinking about all the overhead, and some of it's self-imposed, right? We do it to ourselves. But also the issue I find is the value of the machinery that we're servicing, or the vehicles have a value. And you start approaching a certain percentage of the value of that to repair it. And it's much lower than some of the other skilled trades. So, while our skill sets may command certain compensation levels outside of auto repair, getting that to translate inside auto repair gets to be it kind of gets dicey. It starts feeling like it almost hurts us. So I think the reason I'm asking is, I got to believe there's a lot of people sitting at home, a lot of techs, feeling undervalued, underappreciated, but then really not knowing how they can go in the office and say, like, or the owner's office, the employer's office, and say, hey, we got to talk about wages, and we'd have to factor in cost of living and where you live and all that. But just having that, having a little bit of knowledge to be able to go in there and comfortably say, based off these knowns, cost of living, shop labor rate, my build hours, my production, and then what I feel are these intangibles I bring. And I don't know, they can't put a dollar amount on it, but it's contributing to this, to be able to ask for however much that dollar an hour, or, wage, salary at the end of the year is, to be able to comfortably and confidently ask that. And even if it puts the ball in the shop owner's court to sit back and have to go, like, I might have to change things, or like you're saying, I'm not willing to pay it. Sorry. And I'm not trying to make that sound bad either. That is not a quote unquote bad thing to say. It might be bad from the technician's perspective who's asking for the raise, but in the grand scheme of things, I'm not saying that's fundamentally bad. I don't want to perpetuate the evil shop owner, designation inappropriately.
Technicians now are going through, and it's funny, the parallels, and I think it's kind of giving me a different perspective. Technicians now are going through what pilots are going through. For years and years, there was a glut of people who were willing to fly for virtually no money because they had to build hours in order to get hired on with the airlines. We had, there was a very, very famous, it was a commuter based here out of Charlotte that had first officers that are flying transport category airplanes that were on public assistance. They're on food stamps. And when the airline that I worked for laid off pilots because of the economy, and some of those pilots went to the commuter where they were picked up. When the president of the company came down, one of the guys asked, he said, look, how is it that you can possibly justify paying so little to first officers that they are qualifying for food stamps? And at that time, the president of the company was absolutely nonplussed. He said, look around. Do you see any empty seats? He has a responsibility to the corporation to pay as little as possible for labor. And for years, it was the same way in the trade, because not only were there guys who were my generation and some subsequent generations that wanted to learn about cars and wanted, got involved actively in the hot rod hobby and, really, but there was always a guy who was willing to undercut the shop up the street because of the hero complex. There's always somebody who's willing to do it cheaper. Well, now, so the combination of the fact you had too many people chasing too few jobs, and people that were willing to do the jobs for much less to assume the risk because they wanted, the money. Well, slowly that morphed into now there isn't enough people. So now for the first time, and this is a great period of time for technicians and for pilots both, actually, because they have leverage. What you're asking me is how can you exert this leverage to gain where you should be in the socioeconomic strata that is in our society? What can we do? Well, the first thing goes back to what I said before. Know where you are. Know what your value is based on common numbers that he can understand. If you're going to compare what you're doing to a plumber or any of that, you have to understand that for many programs, there is, and I hate licensure. I'm not a fan of licensing. I'm not, because it doesn't. But the way that it's structured, anybody can essentially step up, just like happens here down south. Anybody here down south can go to Home Depot and buy themselves a tool belt and call themselves a carpenter and get a job on a framing crew. There's no prescribed instruction on it, certainly no testing on it, right? If you want to gain the status, okay, if you want to be recognized for being the professional that you are or the consummate tradesman that you are, then three things have to happen, in my view. The first, there has to be a concerted public effort, public relations campaign showing that, this is not your father's Oldsmobile. All right? It really isn't. All right? These are, if you're going to be repairing these cars, servicing these cars, you have to be smart. You're not going to end this image of being a knuckle-dragging goober, right? Where being a technician is a consolation prize, has got to end. And the only way to do that is through education, public service spots, et cetera, et cetera. For me, the ASC has failed in this regard. Okay, that's just my personal view. Number two, there has to be practical tests. Just as there are for physicians, just as there are for airline pilots, just as there are for accountants, there has to be a way to demonstrate proficiency. You shouldn't be able to walk into Home Depot and pick up some Milwaukee tools and just say, I'm a tech. I can do, I'm an oil change tech, et cetera. The public has to change, and you have to be able to prove your worth. Well, the way to do that is through consolidation.
Yeah.
As horrible as it's going to seem, I think a lot of shops have to shut down. I think a lot of shops, and I don't wish ill on anybody. I'm not looking forward to seeing somebody hit the street and then having a family he can't feed or she can't feed. That sucks. I mean, there's nothing pleasant about that.
Yeah, I've had that thought.
But the reality is we have too many shops chasing too few dollars. And as long as anybody who winds up doing side work is cutting their own throat, they have to realize they have to stop. They have to stop. If your primary employer is not meeting your needs now in a time when you have leverage, change your freaking job. Because every time you go out and you do side work, and you've heard me preach about this before, I apologize, you're cutting your own throat. You're limiting your family's ability to have the things that they should have because you're establishing precedent in the market.
Yep.
There's no reason that a solid B tech shouldn't be earning close to $100,000, between $80,000 and $100,000. And an A tech, easy, 100.5, 125, right? C tech, general service tech, shows up all the time, 35 to 50. Why not? Shouldn't he make as much as a plumber? That C tech has got more money in his toolbox than that plumber does. Okay. Now the plumber may have a van, right? I mean, if we're going to include that, but insofar as, so that's what I want to see, right? Public perception has to change through education.
Absolutely.
We need to have licensing insofar as not actual by the state, but self-policing would be a better way of doing it for right? And standardization. because you wouldn't get on an airplane with a guy who claimed that he was a pilot unless he could prove it. And pilots have to prove it in written and verbal, practical exams, and then line orientation flight training. Well, there's a reason that standards have to be met, and the public recognizes that, so the pay is commensurate with it. Anybody and their grandmother can go to any store that sells hardware and tools, come out and go to a dealership and say, hey, I can be an oil change tech for you. I don't know much, but you teach me and I'll do it. Without some sort of curriculum, that's the reason why the NAPA program is good. That's the reason why the program from Astra is good, because you can generate, it has a curriculum. You follow the curriculum. There's progress reports. There's a way to make sure that person is on a true career path versus saying, okay, you want to be an apprentice? Great. You're going to clean the toilets for the first year. And you're going to go run out and go get lunch for everybody. And every now and again, when you get proficient at it, we'll have you doing oil changes for the next 2.5 years, mounting and balance tires.
For me, and maybe you, there's a kind of a certain, there's kind of a certain romance to that. And I only really see it in the family type businesses where it's the kid, either one of the techs or usually one of the shop owners' kids starts out sweeping the floors, maybe car detailing after service, washing the cars, vacuuming them out, and really working their way up through the levels, if you will, or the different tasks of auto repair, and maybe shadowing somebody or looking over their shoulders, and the shop owner's kid, but he's not paid, he or she's not paid, but they're paying attention, and they kind of go through that apprenticeship program, but it's not really, designed that way. Not like what you would see in some of the other trades where there is a legitimate apprentice program, and you kind of go through that process. A lot of the young people coming in have zero interest in doing that. They do not want to start at the ground floor and work their way up. They're coming in, like what you mentioned, like very little to no skills. They're not really bringing a whole lot. They have potential, which does, the value is, subjective at best. To go through that process of starting out at the very bottom and working your way up through the lube rack, and where maybe some shops have dropped the ball as they go through that progress, kind of rewarding that progress, if that makes sense. And I'm not trying to be like super critical of shops either, or shop owners. There's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of stuff, broken that's outside of that, but we don't perpetuate it necessarily that well either for that, coming up through the ranks and working your way up. And then something I feel very strongly about that I think is getting better and better every day, every year for sure. Having the experienced tech, the techs that's been with you for a decade, 2 decades, and the young tech on the lube rack going, it's like, this sucks. It's 100 degrees in here, changing oil. It sucks. I'm not making all that much money. And my buddies, they went to, they're working at a factory. They make more money than I do. And that journeyman tech or that master tech, the one that's been with you, taking the kid aside and saying, look, this is a great place to work. This is a great profession. And yes, right now, your buddies are making more money than you. But you keep at it. You keep working on this area. You're really good at this. Need a little more work on this. And you start getting on where you're, doing some breaks, that type of work. Those guys they'll never catch you. You're going to do just fine. I'm happy. I got a nice house. I got whatever, however they're going to qualify that. Basically boosting the profession itself and the shop they're working in. And that to me is a really powerful marketing program that I don't know happens enough. I think it's getting better. Don't get me wrong. Better, like you said earlier, it's never been in my memory this good. I probably have to go man, I don't know what, back into the 60s, 70s, 60s when it was 50s?
50s. After the war, when the economy exploded and the opportunities, a lot of guys were coming out of service with motor pool experience. There were, that was, and everything was really, we were focused on a manufacturing economy instead of a service economy, and guys could build a good life for themselves at that time. Basically you're an old soul. Okay. And I speak this affectionately. The romantic idea that you have falls flat on its face because it relies on deferred gratification. And deferred gratification is frowned upon now. The idea of sacrificing today for the blessings of tomorrow, by and large, has been eclipsed by what can you do for me now? I graduated college. I want 6 figures. I don't plan on putting more than 38 hours of work, and a whole bunch of entitlement issues that are brought. So yeah, obviously the programs, the apprenticeship programs that you spoke of that do exist, that are structured, are wonderful, but you still have to find a person who is willing to take it in the shorts for a few years and be uncomfortable, and to look and see his friends that have eclipsed him and may have that house sooner than he is, or drive a nicer car than, or got married, or now on their second kid, or any of that, while he's struggling. That's not an easy thing to do. It relies on character, which is in short supply. Yeah, I'm with you. I'd love to see it, and I'm enheartened, just like you are, to see that these programs are now being reinvigorated and brought back. But it's going to take a lot more than that. And the only way to do it is for a mother to want to be able to see, if a mother to turn to her kid. Imagine two old ladies are talking. Okay, they're on a park bench, and their kids are grown, and they haven't seen one another for a long time. One's going to turn to the other and says, what is your son? Oh, my son's an accountant. Oh, that's very nice. And you're saying, oh, he's a plumber. Oh, it's good. He's good. He's a plumber. Yeah, sure. Right. Because saying that they're a plumber, okay, has a certain status that's involved with it. Right. Plumbers earn good money. Okay. That's what that says. Now same women. Oh, my son's an accountant, and my other one's a mechanic. Pause. Right? Because there's no status that's involved with that. Not status insofar, but there's no recognition of the sacrifice and the work that's involved. Because in the mind of the public, it hasn't changed. And if you look at it, if you look at shops, why should it? Because they're advertising tune-ups. Really? I can't tell you the last time I changed points. Right? You look on some of the paperwork from the shops, what they wind up doing on their 30-point courtesy inspections and stuff, and it says check mixture. Really? How you doing that, sport?
Fuel trims.
You got an ASC test, check drum brakes? Really? Really? Carburetors? Really? Nice. I mean, look, you give me a Rochester Quadrajet, I'm a happy camper. Right? That's not a problem. I'll rebuild that son of a bitch all day long. I'll forget where the check balls go, but it'll come back to me. Not a problem.
Do you put the pad under those plugs, or do you epoxy them?
Oh, no. You leave the plugs alone because you got to play. No. No. Put it. No. What are you kidding me? No. I'm old school. Hell, when I was coming up, you wanted your car to sound mean. You flipped the air cleaner cover over. That's you were hot stuff then. I learned the firing order of a Chevy 350 before I learned my own Social Security number. I mean, are you kidding me? So no, I encourage, and one thing that I forgot to mention before is that aside from those things that I mentioned, I really think that techs have to learn terminology so that they can speak to owners and the people that hire them in the language that they understand. You have to create that line of communication because, number one, you want that owner to know that you're not no dummy, that you understand business, so that you're not going to ask for anything that's unreasonable. there was a forum, I'm not going to mention the name, where this technician simply did not understand why he was not entitled to 50% of the labor rate. And he was going to argue till he's blue in the face. We did this happened in the 60s, this happened in the 70s, this happened in the 80s. There's no reason why I should not be allowed to get 50% of the labor rate. I haven't earned it. What's changed? Nothing's changed. Everything. He, went off on a rant, the moron. But okay. So, the fact is that when you say stuff like that, you're showing your ignorance because you don't have a clue. You're so focused on yourself that you don't know what the hell is happening to the outside of the industry. Right? I'd love to be able to have the same expenses that I did when I started turning wrenches in the 70s. I would love it. Not a problem. Right? How many subscriptions did you have to pay for when you're working on your Rochester Quadrajet?
You bought those motor books or the Mitchell books once every few years.
Yep. Yeah. I've got them upstairs, man. That's, I still have stuff from 64. At one point, my friend who was the engineer, I had every owner's manual, not every shop manual for every car that General Motors produced for 20 years. He was an engineer and he had them, and I bought them for $500 because I wanted them, and I filled a storage building with them. And then ultimately, many, many years later, I pitched them except for the ones for the Camaro, the Corvette, et cetera, so that because I knew I could sell them on eBay and make my $500 back. But yeah, that's what you have to do. You have to be able to speak in the language, and you can't expect that an owner just knows. Well, he just knows I haven't gotten a raise in a year. Well, everything else. Well, if you step outside of your industry and look at other industries, okay, other businesses, what other businesses always have a cost of living raise every year, index raise every year, as a percentage of all the businesses that are out there? I didn't get one every year. I worked for a Fortune 100 company. I didn't get one every year. I didn't know of anybody that did. Now, however, techs have that leverage. Man, this is a great time to be a tech. Not an arrogant tech, but an educated tech. A tech who goes out to establish his worth because he knows what questions to ask. And if he doesn't, he listens to podcasts like this. He asks questions. He reads. All the information is out there. Again, like I said before, turn off the effing game. Turn on your brain. Because that guy on the field who's carrying the football don't give a rat's ass about you. Live or die, he don't care. He gets paid. Wear his jersey with his name on it. You pay too much freaking money for an entertainer? The hell you do? Shut up, sing. Shut up and carry the football. Don't care. He ain't paying your wage. He ain't making it for your family.
Yeah, and educated, you can use that leverage, but not abuse it. You're going to try to abuse it, it's going to blow up. But because
you
can educate.
What you're trying to do is you're trying to come. Look, I've been running a business for a long time. Okay, what I consider to be a long time, and it's over 2 decades. Okay, so we're 24 years now. All right, and I've had techs come to me and flat out tell me they've never ran a business. They don't know anything about it, except they just know what opportunities I'm missing because they've been a tech. Really? Okay. Show me the math. What? I'm willing to listen. I could be wrong. Hell, I could absolutely be wrong. Remember the first time they came in and said, you have to buy an alignment machine. Okay, I got to buy an alignment machine. Yeah, see, if the payment is this and this and this, and look, you've paid for it. All you got to do is 10 and a half or 11 alignments and you've paid for it. Really? What about my fixed expenses during that period of time? What? If I haven't budgeted for that money, what happens to my fixed expenses? Where does the money come from? What? Oh, you just don't know. You just don't want to spend the money because you're cheap. No. So I got the alignment machine. I just bought one used, obviously, so that I could lower the cost. And then I rebudgeted and, we made up for it. Not a problem.
Yeah, I missed it by a few years. But that was the big pitch for the big box analyzers, the Sun machines, the SEA Allen machines, the
Well,
there's one more big one. Oh,
and
Bear.
Bear and a Counselor 2. I still have a Counselor 2 in my outbuilding. Rasterize.
But I think those things were, high 20s, low 30 grand.
Yep.
And that was the same exact sales pitch. If I remember the stories right, that all you had to do was this many cars a day. You would give the customer the report. And there's check boxes where the printout would say it needs wiper blades, but you'd hand it to the customer. The customer would be like, "Oh, the computer says I need wiper blades. You better do them." And that was the pitch. And they sold a lot of those things. Man, there's a ton of them sitting in the back corners of shops. Maybe not so much anymore, but years ago, wow, they were everywhere.
Yeah, there's a reason. Look, if anybody's a front end man who's listening, who actually is proficient at doing alignments, it's an art, man. It's a craft. To do a proper alignment is a skill set that I flat out admire. There are guys that do it so much better than I do. I can get everything where it's supposed to be, but there's not much grace involved. And there are guys that can look at the geometry and just know. I mean, okay, so we took something that was a craft, a real skill, and we dumbed it down to the point where now you can have basically the selling point is we can take somebody who's never seen a car before, and then they enter in the year, make, model of the vehicle, and a video comes up and shows them what to do and what size wrench to put in what location to turn in what direction every single step. So they don't have to do anything except know how to get it in the green. The fact that it scrubs the tires, that it does whatever. Green is good, right? Set the tone and let it go. And they call that an alignment. Well, that's not an alignment.
I couldn't agree with you more. I've had this discussion with a couple of techs. It's one of those, I think it's one of those few areas of auto repair, especially nowadays, where you could have the reputation in town as being the guy. So you kind of have the diagnostics end of things. You can be the guy, in town or, whatever radius. You can be the guy. If your car doesn't run right, if you got a weird electrical problem, take it to this person. He or she, they'll figure it out. Same with the alignments. You can't get that alignment right. Your car's chewing up tires. You've been to 2 or 3 different shops for their alignments. That I know there's the guy. He works here. And after that, it gets pretty rough. You don't really have the brakes guy. You don't really have certain other areas of the auto repair where you could be just known as, the one. And that could be an actual, almost pedestal or
specialized skill.
Shoot for, I guess. Or achieve.
What was funny is here in Charlotte, there was a place that was uptown. Place looked like a dungeon from the inside. I mean, it was dark and dank, and they used to align all nature of vehicles. It didn't matter, buses, cars, trucks, didn't matter. But they did it with the string system. Okay, this is a system that I learned on. String and then light aligner.
Oh, so, yeah.
They did it in pits. Okay, I mean this was old school. They didn't change string aligners. Okay, which were old when I was learning on them back in the 70s. But they were always known for alignments because these guys knew. They knew what it took to set it up. Interviewing the guy was, what kind of driving you do? When's the last time you heard any of tech that walk over or turn to a service writer and say, hey, listen, find out if this guy is he a salesman? See, he's got a lot of miles on his car. Has he spent a lot of time on the highway? Or is this person going to the mountains where it's twisty all the time? Are they doing local? Because I'm going to set the front end up for that. Yep. Right? You don't. But that's old school. That's the way we learn.
I've never heard that. No.
Right? Because it was customer service.
Yeah. Yep. I kind of lament that. My first ever podcast with Carm as a individual as a guest, I had lamented about that some of the craftsmanship has gone away, and a lot of it's kind of sad. And it's not just auto repair. I was listening to Jocko Willink,
SEAL Team 6,
does some stuff with leadership training, or he talks about it. Yep, he's a SEAL, Navy SEAL.
Yeah, Richard Marchenko died about a month ago, which was the head of SEAL Team 6. Yeah, he was quite the character.
So Jocko is involved also in some boot making, and then making jeans in the USA. And they had to go find old retired workers to teach people how to use the looms. Nobody knew how to use a loom.
Yep.
And that was a few years away from being gone. That's terrible. It's just so sad to think about. And that, that's maybe a bad example, but there's so much of that stuff that it might just one day be gone. Nobody will know how to do it. They'll have to try to teach themselves how to do it the old way.
Well, I'm encouraged because I see that there's a resurgence of artisan craftsmanship. It's people are going back to, making things as simple as using brake rotors to make pans. Cast iron pans and steel pans in this country, handmade boots, etc. There are a lot of the older stuff is coming back, which really makes me smile. Because, like you, I lament not seeing it, but auto repair as a service has become a commodity.
Yep.
And as a commodity, it's faster, cheaper. Who could do it faster? And your example about Rolex and not finding, about the looms, Rolex had the same problem with the Rolex Daytona, which enjoyed a resurgence. It's a watch that you saw that was Paul Newman had. Well, they didn't have anybody to make it, so they had to bring the retirees back to teach the younger watchmakers how to make this watch because they didn't have it. I'm a watch collector. So auto repair has become a commodity. And it isn't valued as a service anymore. Advocacy, which is what, in my estimation, represents the highest form of service, which is to be an advocate for your client, is frowned upon. Because if you had two shops, one shop, and they were serving the similar demographic in a different part of town, so they weren't direct competition with one another. If everything was identical, literally everything was identical, the skill set of the employees, the number of employees, the number of cars that could be handled a day, everything, the commodity-based shop, volume-based shop is going to make more money than the advocate-based, relationship-based shop. It's just a fact of life, which is the reason that a lot of third-party apps that you see have worked assiduously, RepairPal, Open Door, a number of others, or Open Bay rather, to reduce auto repair to a commodity. Well, when you reduce auto repair to a commodity, can you afford to pay your techs? Can you afford to invest the money in the ADAS equipment, in the tech training, in the Pico scopes, and in any of the equipment that you need to service these technologically advanced vehicles? No. But you have outside market forces that are driving this industry in a direction that it need not go. And it's up to shop owners to say no. I mean, look at what happened to businesses that adopted the Groupon model. Go online and look at all the complaints because Groupon drove businesses out of business because of their pricing model and how much money. Basically, it's just somebody reaching into your pocket and wanting to make you feel fortunate that they were willing to do that. Be grateful that I'm reaching into your pocket and I'm not giving you a reach around either so that I can wind up taking your wallet.
Oh, man, this has been great. When can we do part 2? Because
anytime you want. But what I'd like to do, and I'm imposing myself here, I really want to
impose away.
I really want to go over basic numbers for techs.
Okay,
I promise I won't. I won't bore the hell out of it. Well, I might, but I'll throw in occasional bit of profanity, make fun of myself at some time, and that'll make guys smile. But I really want guys to understand that they can earn what they want to earn if they know how to ask for it, so that they can receive the value that you and I both agree they should get, but they have to learn how to communicate. So what I really want to do is go over financials. And I'm not saying that we're going to wind up going into the weeds on this. I just want to know that techs, when they walk into their shop where they're working, or a shop where they want to work, or especially where they're working first, actually, they can look at what's being presented, and they can have a better understanding of their place in the market and their place in their shop, because now they have a wider perspective. It's not just about me. It's how do I fit into the bigger picture? Let me see the bigger picture. Well, if you understand gross profit, if you understand the difference between markup and margin, if you understand some formulas that are necessary for you to determine what you're entitled to or what you can earn, if you can understand what loaded versus unloaded labor rate is, if you understand what a balance sheet is, if you understand what an income statement is, if you understand, and I'm not trying to turn anybody into accountant or bookkeeper. I just want you to be able to know, what does ARO mean? Okay.
Yeah. I like it. I think if we do it sooner rather than later, I mean, it's numbers for techs with Dutch Silverstein it'll be part 2.
Let the Yid teach you about numbers.
I really appreciate, I really appreciate you coming on. Really, really, really look up to you.
It's misplaced. I'm a terrible human being.
I'm no way.
But I appreciate the opportunity to be on. I look forward to going over that with you in whenever you'd like. This is really important. Techs have an opportunity to shine, and I want to see them shine.
Yeah, me too. You're
very welcome.
Thank you very, very much. Don't forget, guys, you can reach me at mattfanslowpodcast@gmail.com, and you can track me down on Facebook. And I really thank you for listening. Can't thank you enough. Thank you to Napa. And again, thank you to Dutch for taking the time to sit down with me. And I'll talk to you next time.
You've been listening to Matt Fanslow, diagnosing the aftermarket A to Z on the Aftermarket Radio Network. Follow Matt on your favorite listening app. He's very interested in what you have to say. Let him know what you'd like him to cover and come on the show. Matt is all for advancing the aftermarket. Find Matt Fanslow on social media and connect, or on aftermarketradionetwork.com.